All right, so here we go. Welcome. I'm Alice Heiman, and you are on the learning session about how to take leaders from underperforming to overperforming. And what 50 years has taught us, that is how long IMS has been in business, and they have learned a lot over the years. Today, I'm very excited because the Institute of Management Studies, IMS, their president, Charles Good, is here with us today, and he is an expert in learning and development. So I am going to query him on everything that's happening in the world of learning and development today. We plan this webinar to be about 30 minutes. Please make sure to put any questions you have in the chat. And for those of you who stay with us till the end, we have a very special program that we're going to invite you to with Matt Abrams. He is the author of Think Faster, Talk Smarter, and he's also a podcast host of the Talk Smart podcast. So you will definitely want to stick around to find out how you can get some great information from Matt Abrams through IMS, and we'll be giving you that information at the end. So, again, today I have with me expert Charles Good, and we are going to be covering several things about learning and development. We want to talk about the current state of learning development. Things have changed so much, and especially with lots of companies out there offering learning and development, companies doing it on their own, and of course, AI. We want to talk about the problems that we've seen, the common solutions, and why they don't work. And then we're, of course, going to share a better way so that by the end of this learning program, you will be able to actually do some things differently at your own company. So, good morning, Charles, and welcome.
Thank you, Alice. Happy to join you today and talk more about a field that I'm passionate about.
Yes, I know you are because I follow you on LinkedIn, as you know. We've known each other a long time. I read every post you make. Some of the posts that you've been making lately have gotten tremendous amount of views, including the most recent one on Matt Abrams, which is about how to reduce or eliminate your non-words when speaking. And that one went viral because everybody really wants to be a better speaker and reduce their non-words. So check out Charles' LinkedIn if you haven't already for great content daily. So let's dive right into the current state of learning and development. We want to really understand what it is, what's going on, so that we can make the changes that we need. So let's just take a look at a few of these trends. This is amazing. Organizations are spending 360 billion globally on training. And was it worth it, Charles? What's going on here?
Well, in many cases, it's not because they're learning the wrong way. And we're going to go through some of those issues with the current state of learning and development. But there's a lot of money in this industry. There's a lot of value that companies perceive in training their leaders, and rightfully so. Leaders need to be trained because many people come into leadership positions from being a technical person or an individual contributor that's very proficient in what they do. Now they're moved into a people manager position. They're not trained on the skills that are needed, and now they're being judged or graded by a different metric. So this really necessitates us to provide that learning so they can become better people leaders, which many cases they don't get that training through their formal education. It's really learning on the job or through training programs like IMS.
So companies have the right idea spending all this money, but maybe it's the execution that's not exactly right. And so we'll have to talk some more about that. All right, 75% of 1,500 managers surveyed from across 50 organizations were dissatisfied with their company's learning and development. Why is that so?
Once again, it's about moving from credits to outcomes, right? In order to begin practicing lean learning, organizations need to move from measuring CPEs, additional educational opportunities or credits, to measuring business outcomes created. Enough with the smile sheets. A lot of people like the training, but it's not connecting back to their workflow. It's not impacting bottom line results, and people aren't applying what they've learned.
So they're spending all this money, but what you're saying is that people are still dissatisfied. So there's got to be something wrong. That's a big disconnect because only 12% of employees are applying the new skills that they learned. Whoa. So am I wasting my money, Charles?
Well, in many cases, you're forgetting a lot of what you've learned pretty rapidly after every learning experience that you have. And as learning professionals, we need to stop playing the role of service provider and work more like consultants, partnering with leaders to help identify and address the root causes in driving long term impacts within the organization.
My gosh. So it seems like there are a lot of problems, especially if we're spending that much money and not really getting the results that we need. So let's take a look. We are learning, but it seems that we're learning at the wrong time. What do you mean by that?
Well, people learn best when they have to learn. Applying learning to real world situations strengthens their focus, their determination to learn. But many times, training programs are not done that way. They often learn uniform topics on L&D's schedule and at a time that bears little relevance to their
Oh,
role and what they need within their job.
I see. So when it doesn't really make a big difference, I'm maybe not going to take in the information the same way I would when it's critical and I have to learn it either to be promoted or to do my job better or perhaps get fired if I don't. So when the learning really matters is the best time, and when we just throw it at people when maybe they're not really ready for it or it doesn't matter as much, we're not going to get the results. What about the wrong things?
So you want to see people's eyes glaze over faster than me finishing the sentence, then mandate busy employees go to some training on maybe business writing skills or conflict resolution or some other course that doesn't align with their needs. It's not going to resonate, it's not going to connect well, and they're not going to apply it because once again, it's not a relevant and timely topic that they need right now.
Gosh, so if we're doing it at the wrong time, we're teaching them the wrong things at the wrong time. And now you're also telling me we're doing it the wrong way.
Once again, a lot of training, a lot of learning and development in the corporate space is based on traditional methods that rely heavily on lectures and presentations, passive learning, which can be passive for learners as well. We need to employ more active learning methodologies such as interactive workshops, simulations, hands on projects that really are more effective at promoting retention and the application of knowledge. Plus, they lack context. Training programs sometimes fail to provide any real world context or relevance for the skills being taught. So learners may struggle to see the practical application of what they're even learning.
Lectures are a real snoozer, let's face it. And a lot of us remember when we were in college sleeping through a lot of lectures. We just don't learn best that way. We really do learn best when the timing is right. The topics are what we're keenly interested in, and we learn in short bursts that allow us to practice what we're learning, and we're gonna talk some more about that. All right, so there are a lot of common learning myths out there, and I think this is maybe why we're spending a lot of money and not getting the results we want, Charles. So let's take a look at some of those myths. Now, this one, I mean, coming from my world of training salespeople, this one and done, I am telling you, it's got to stop, right? You can't do it for anyone, but especially for salespeople, you can't just go, oh, here's your training. Now go fix, the world and make it better and use everything you learned. And we're never going to talk about this again. So tell us about one and done.
Now, learning is a journey, not a one time event. That's for any kind of learning. Think about when you were in school, when you were learning a book, say like in English literature. Then did you just read Romeo and Juliet one time and just absorb it and get it and move on and have acquired all that? No, it's a over a period of time. You analyzed it, you wrote essays on it, you examined it with experts so they could unpack deeper meaning, the symbolism. The same way in a corporate space or when you're reading books these days. If you read a business book, why do you think a one-time read of a business book is not going to be very effective? Because learning has to be over time in short bursts like you were saying. Otherwise, it's going to fade away. But it's often easier to measure immediate results. Most effective programs build, however, on these initial changes with reminders, ongoing interventions, additional learning, so it can be reinforced over time to minimize the forgetting curve and the effects of that.
Well, and just imagine if we took all the athletes in the world and just taught them what they're supposed to do one time and then put them in the game. I
Not
mean,
very
it's
effective.
It's ridiculous. We would never do that. But yet, for our most valuable players on our executive team, our up and coming leaders, the people who are really going to make our company grow, we think that teaching them something one time is enough. No, it's just like everything else, right? We have to teach it many times and we absolutely have to have a chance to practice. Now, here's another one that really bothers me, and it bothers salespeople as well. You put all the senior salespeople in a room and all the beginning salespeople in a room, and you teach them all the same thing. In my world, that just doesn't work. And I would imagine that doesn't work with leadership either.
No, it doesn't. I mean, the one size fits all approach is no longer sufficient in today's dynamic business environment. By tailoring solutions to the unique context and the goals of each customer, of each organization, a leadership development company can demonstrate its commitment to delivering real, tangible results. The cookie cutter method no longer is effective. So you
Yeah.
really have to customize it and personalize it. And that's what leaders are demanding these days.
And that goes with teaching the wrong things, right? The one size fits all goes right with that. We're teaching the wrong things. All right. Tell us about the forgetting myth, because I think this one's really interesting.
Yeah, people feel like they remember everything that they were taught, and that just isn't the case. There's so much research to back this up. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve basically states it was by Hermann Ebbinghaus in the late 1800s. He wanted to test people's recall of information after a certain period of time passed. And what he found was that information degrades very rapidly in the first 48 hours. After that, it somewhat stabilizes it. So that's why it's so important for all of us to reinforce this material quickly after we learn it. So that's why what we try to do is right after the learning, a day after the learning, we're sending materials reinforcing the learning because otherwise people are going to forget close to 80% of what they were taught within 48 hours if it's not reinforced. So that critical span of that 48 to 72 hours after a learning experience is so critical to reinforce the material, to get it back in their memory and to solidify it, to consolidate it so that it's less likely to be forgotten later on.
Right. And humans need spaced repetition, right? So we need to repeat and then have some time, in between and then repeat again and have some time in between and repeat again. And that's the way that we really get the skills to sink in and be able to use them. And of course, the practice along with it. I've got a
Cramming, yeah,
question.
cramming is great for school, but remember, I think
Yeah,
everyone did cramming, and I remembered it for about 24 hours, long enough to take the test. Afterward, everything just went out of my memory. It's not an
exactly.
effective tool, learning tool, to make things stick in your mind.
Yeah, we've gotta make things stick, and we've gotta make them stick over time. So retraining is absolutely necessary. All right, so there's a question from the audience, and I think this is a good time to answer it. So one of our HR directors says that it's difficult to get sign off on initiatives. He is agreeing with everything that we're saying here, but how do you sell it to the stakeholders, the senior people who are going to pay for this? Because they will want to have a small budget and just do some sort of maybe online learning or a templated program of some type and not really understand what you and I are talking about here. So, what's a good way to sell this to the stakeholders?
Well, and I think there's not any reason why this approach needs to be more expensive or costly to the organization than their traditional approach, but the effects of it, the behavior change, is really a big difference in this approach versus that traditional approach. But one, get stakeholder buy-in from the start. Make sure that you tie it to business outcomes because learning for the sake of learning is not the right reason. Plus, a lot of times training is not the most effective way to go about it.
Right.
If you have a performance issue, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's job aids you need to provide. Training is just one of several solutions. A great learning and development provider, service provider, will identify when does training make the most sense. Let's try to get stakeholder buy-in from the start and tie it to those critical metrics and get people to apply it and use it so they can see the difference afterward. Because so many senior executives at organizations are jaded, discouraged by the fact that they put all this money in and they can't really tell what they're getting out of those training sessions.
So, first would be make sure training is what's actually needed because if you're trying to pitch the stakeholders on putting a budget up for training, but really what it is morale or another kind of a problem that's sort of hidden. Training's not going to fix it anyway. So then they're just going to be disappointed at the end and it will be harder to get the budget the next time. So first, make sure what is the problem we're trying to fix here and will training really fix it? And as you said, a good provider will help you identify that right away. Then, secondly, once you've decided, yes, training will be a great help to us, make sure it's a learning journey and explain that to your stakeholders. This is not a one and done. This is not a one size fits all. This is a specific training and it's not a one and done. We're going to have a learning journey and help people implement what they've learned. And we'll measure that. We'll measure before the training, after the training. We'll either do that with hard facts or we'll survey people to see their feelings. So then you know that your money was well spent. That will help the stakeholders as well. So I think those are some things that you can absolutely do to help your stakeholders. And if they are not familiar with what good learning is, because maybe they never had that opportunity, they've only taken lectures or maybe read a book and, tried to learn it on their own, then try to explain to them exactly what the learning will look like and why it's superior to whatever method they're thinking about. So, anything else you want to add on to that?
No, I think that says it pretty well. Excited to get into a better way.
Yes, right. So we kind of covered here now what not to do. There's probably some more things that you shouldn't do, like training as a punishment. I've seen that happen at corporations. Not good. And identifying, who needs what very specifically, again, versus that one size fits all. I think it's important. And then really just recognizing, too, as we said, that training isn't always the answer. But when training is the answer, there is a better way than doing it in a very old traditional model that is not going to help your learners. So let's start there, Charles. And let's talk about building the right behavior.
Well, what people need to realize is that you need to start building the right behaviors and habit loops during the learning event itself. People are always going to resist change, in large part because they're likely being asked to not only start something new, but something that's awkward, uncomfortable,
Mm.
this habit. So it's not going to be easy. And when they go back to the office, they have a well grooved habit already in place, defaulting back to those old ways. So if you're not helping them develop the right behaviors and habit loops within
Yeah.
the learning experience, getting them to practice it, feel more comfortable, confident, and committed to doing something differently, then there's a whole lot of resistance that they're going to encounter when they go back to the job. And there's this well grooved neural pathway that's going to tell them, hey, just do it the old way.
So we don't want them to do that. So we've got to build the right behavior. And then what about resisting change? We know that it's hard for people to change even when they want to.
There's a lot of research that goes into this. You see this a lot, I'm sure, within everyone's life. You stayed with services. I know I've stayed with certain providers for TV, for internet, because it's just too hard to change. Not that I like them. I just don't want to have to undergo that pain of change that would require me to switch providers. So you have to realize that everyone has this resistance to change. One study even indicated for you to switch products, the product just doesn't have to be better. It has to be 9 times better for
Wow.
you to want to switch to that product, because all that resistance to change is going to happen. And that's a big part why, 70 to 75% of all change initiatives fail. Every year, billions of dollars of money being put toward these massive change initiatives are failures because they're not considering the habit implications for that change. What are you currently rewarding someone for versus what do you want them to do? And how can you make that easier?
Right. Oh my gosh. All right. So here's another part of a better way, right? A lean learning model. Now, let's explain to the audience exactly what is a lean learning model and why is that a better way?
Yeah, lean learning pays homage to Toyota's lean manufacturing system. It stresses using effort only when it's needed, improving outcomes, cutting waste. It's quick, it's affordable, it provides employees and organizations immediate impact. So it's about learning the core of what you need to learn. What's the critical 20% that's going to have 80% of the value moving forward? That's what IMS does. We don't give you a survey course on strategic thinking. We identify what's the core, what's that essential 20% with the tools, tips, and techniques included that's going to give our attendees the necessary skills that they can use right away and that's relevant and applicable to them. And then after we've identified what that core is, we've actionized it by putting them into practice, looking at habits, looking at ways in which we can get them more comfortable with using these new skills. then we want them applying it to real world situations immediately. We want them to see, what are you needing this for? Let's not make up some event. Let's talk about how are you actually going to use this and what are some challenges when you use it so that they can actually apply it afterwards so that it fits well into their workflow. It's not something that they can't see any application for.
Yeah.
And then the final piece is receiving immediate feedback and refining your understanding, which is so critical to any learning. Getting that feedback, getting it right away, and then modifying, and then repeating the cycle, rinse and repeat, so that we get to those essential pieces of any core learning. We make sure that it applies with real world scenarios and situations, and we're getting feedback from them. Is it working? Is it not? Okay, let's course correct. We got a great coaching piece of our model that the coaching helps out with that one-on-one interaction to get people to really deepen the learning, contextualize it more for them, and hopefully apply it as a result.
This is what I really love about the Institute for Management Studies. Knowing this company for 20 years, working with them, having taken the training courses myself, the learning and development courses, having my clients use these courses, I love that you approach this differently. I love that you have this learning journey for people to go on, that you've very thoughtfully crafted all of these programs, that you curate the right information for the clients so that they're not doing the one size fits all. You're learning about their audience, their leaders, what their leaders need, and you're curating everything for them very specifically. And this whole learning journey that you've done and the way that you put it together is just so far superior to any other training that I've seen on the market. So I really appreciate this lean learning model that we're talking about. There's some other important factors as well. And both of us know how important mindset is, right? And I think that a lot of companies overlook this when they delve into, okay, we're going to go get some training. Well, great. Maybe they're going to get LinkedIn Learning. Maybe they're going to get some other online training. Maybe they're going to even bring a trainer in. But what that company doesn't help them do is think through the mindset that's necessary in order to really bring the training in and not have it be a one and done, have everybody really get the most out of it and be able to apply it, right? So let's talk about that mindset. Let's talk about the psychological safety first. You just tell people to go off and do a training on their own. Sometimes, of course, they're resistant to change. Maybe that doesn't feel safe. Maybe they don't know what to do. Maybe they're afraid they're going to be in a room of people who can't share in front of. So let's talk about that, Charles. What about the psychological safety? What's important there?
Yeah, mindset matters a great deal because it really influences and impacts your readiness to learn. Our research shows that different participants come with different levels of readiness for growth, and some may need more support than others. But we have to provide that safe space so they're willing to interact, to connect, to engage. Because if they're not, the learning's not going to happen at the same depth and level as if we have that. So to establish that, you want to make sure before you ask them to participate and do anything deep, connect them on a higher level, more superficial level, get them comfortable with participating, engaging with others before you ask them a little bit more detailed or in-depth questions that you want them to share with their group. That readiness to learn, strongly ties to that psychological safety. And there's so much on psychological safety from Amy Edmondson. It's really popular these days, but it's so important for teams. The best teams, Google found this when they did Project Aristotle in 2014 and 2015. They thought they wanted to identify what separates the best teams from the average teams. They looked at IQ of the group, they looked at all factors. And the one factor that came up again and again and again was they all have psychological sense of safety. It's okay to make mistakes. They're not going to be punished for making mistakes. They can take risks. There's that support, that trust with other team members that they're really looking out for them and they're good and not having to worry about any punitive repercussions from saying the wrong thing or taking certain risks. And then, finally, is that growth versus fixed mindset. This comes out of Carol Dweck's work at Stanford. And the growth mindset is I can learn anything. It's not fixed, meaning if I want to learn something, I can do it. I can learn a new language at any age. I just have to put in the effort and the practice. The fixed mindset says, hey, my IQ is set based on this amount, so I'm really not able to do anything to improve it. and I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look dumb. So I'm not going to take certain risks or challenges or grow because I feel like I need to protect me being smart and that perception with others. I see this a lot with kids. When you praise your children, you should praise them for effort, not for being smart, because being smart is something they can't do anything about. That's fixed. You praise them for effort. You can always say, hey, great effort. Even though you might not have gotten the grade you wanted, I love your effort. Or your effort wasn't great this time. You need to improve it.
And I think that's being specific like that is very important. This growth versus fixed mindset, you can read more about it, as Charles said, from Carol Dweck, and there's tons written about it for kids and adults. But it is important to determine if your leaders have a growth or a fixed mindset, because they're not going to be ready to learn with a fixed mindset, that's for sure. So we have to make sure that they have that growth mindset and they believe that they can improve. They believe they can get better. They believe they can learn anything that they need to learn. Um, all right. So, more goodness about the way that the Institute for Management Studies provides leadership and development training and all the wonderful courses. I really love the way you have put your programs together so that it's easy for the learner. So, let's talk about that. Um, we've got a 20 format. What's the first 20?
So the first 20, so with any program, an hour-long program, even longer, you realize all the data and research supports this is that without participation, they're immersion killers. No matter how exciting, engaging, funny, moving, or talented the speaker is, the longer he or she is on stage, the more the audience just lowers their immersion scores, meaning they're not engaged, they're not interactive. So the first 20 minutes of every hour, we have content, right? So we're sharing that content. The second 20 minutes is where we're going to apply that content or that learning for the individual so that they can hopefully use it. Because we're a lot of times we're closing knowledge gaps, but we're also closing skill gaps, and skills need to be practiced.
In a
Think about
real
the first,
world setting on a problem that they would
right.
actually have to solve, right?
Absolutely, and they have to be able you have to build those habits and practice within the training itself, otherwise it's not gonna be used afterward. And then that final 20 minutes is a debrief, right? Asking questions, connecting it in a deeper way with the individuals, and also taking a break because our mind needs time to process, to consolidate, time for reflection so they know where and when to apply it. I can,
Yeah,
going
absolutely.
back to your
That
school
rest
days.
is so important. Just like
Yeah.
with exercise when you're learning something new, right? Or you're
Yep.
running or whatever you're doing, you need that rest period as well. So your
Well,
brain or body can absorb.
exactly, and that's the ideal framework. It might vary to some extent. Like you mentioned before, I just wanted to just kind of profile. We have 3 levels of curation with any IMS program. The first level of curation is really identifying topics that you're in need of that are relevant and timely for you. And we have experts. I mean, that's one of our differentiators at IMS. We have thought leaders, experts, recognized thought leaders that come in within the IMS framework and really produce some amazing programs that lead to behavior change. Second level of creation, when you come to any of our programs, we curate it for the audience. So we want to make sure it's relevant for the audience. And then the third level is after the program. We want to curate it at an individual level so that we want you applying more of what you've learned. So after the program, it's the one-on-one coaching that we have for our members so that you can really deepen the impact and the learning from any program. So we try to do all this
Absolutely.
just trying to make it more impactful and get you to apply and do more, not just know more.
And all of that really depends on a learning culture. Of course, that starts with leadership, comes down from the CEO. Do you have a learning culture or don't you, right? Because whether you know it or not, there is a learning culture at your company, right, Charles?
Well, yeah, and is your organization empowering a positive culture of learning? Organizations with poor learning cultures breed confirmation, stagnation, experience higher turnover with their talent, struggle to keep their customers happy. So there's a lot of benefits to having this learning culture. And like you said, whether or not you're doing it deliberately or not, you have a learning culture in your organization. It's best to be more deliberate with that learning culture and making sure that you're moving it in the right direction.
Yeah, be intentional for sure about your learning culture. Now, we're at the end here, and we said that if you stay till the end, you were going to get a great treat from Matt Abrams, the author of Think Faster, Talk Smarter, and the Talk Smart podcast. Charles, I understand that Matt is going to be the speaker at one of your upcoming programs.
June 4th, we have 1 hour programs that are complimentary to our membership base, but we're extending this offer to anyone that's here now on our call. So, love for you to take advantage of that. Be our guest for this 1 hour program that's going to happen on June 4th from 11 to noon Eastern time. We'll give you more details in the follow up that we're going to be sending out to everyone. But love for you to attend that. Like Al said, Matt Abraham's an amazing educator, especially on communication. He's had so many practical tools, tips, and strategies around small talk, impromptu conversations, and those speaking up to leaders that are senior to you, as well as just maintaining good practices, good habits in all of your communications opportunities. Not a session to be missed, but
He's a
love to
great
have you part of
speaker
that.
too, and he's very entertaining while he's speaking. He really
You bet.
keeps people engaged.
Absolutely.
All right. So, if there are any other questions, please put them into the chat, and I'm going to watch for those while we'll give you the last bit. If you are interested to learn more about this, which I'm sure all of you are, this is how you can reach Charles. You can look at the website. We have all the programs are on there, and you can look at the different emerging leader programs. There's women in leadership programs, there's general programs, so many topics. So please peruse that on the website. Charles has a great YouTube channel. He is also a podcast host, and his podcasts are fantastic. I listen to them all the time. And like I said, I also follow him on LinkedIn because he is just putting out great content every single day. And then Charles, I know they can connect with you on LinkedIn. I put your LinkedIn in the chat. And how else do you want them to reach you?
Reach me by email if you want, but happy. I kind of live on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest way to reach me, but feel free to reach out through email as well. Love to talk to you, learn more about your learning challenges and opportunities that we can partner with you.
Wonderful. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but again, you can reach out to Charles by email or by LinkedIn, and he can answer those for you. And of course, you'll be getting a follow up email from us as well with all of this information. Really like to thank everyone for joining us today. Charles, this was an awesome. I learned a lot, and I know that everybody listening also has probably some new thoughts and ideas about how they're going to run training and development at their company.
Thank you, Alice, for hosting today, and thank all of you for joining us. I look forward to talking to you soon and seeing you on LinkedIn.